name's Colonel Denny Peoples. I'm the senior instructor here at Prescott High School Junior ROTC. We're blessed to have a hometown hero, as we call it here in Prescott, a retired Brigadier General Robert Etter has volunteered to come here and talk to us about his career, where he came up, where you started off as high school, some of your lessons learned, and give you some of his wisdom through the years. Brief background is he actually flew B-25s. Pretty cool. He flew in Vietnam, and he worked at the Pentagon. So anyway, everybody give him a round of applause, please. Colonel Etter.
I'll tell you, folks, there's a term I call destiny, and it's destiny that I give to you folks today. I obviously had nothing to do with it, but it's my privilege. And carry that a bit farther, how much have you had to do with where you were born? Destiny, some higher power caused that to happen. You could have been born a Ubangi in Africa. Not that there's anything wrong with those folks. But the opportunity that you have in this country, I think I can pass on a clue as to how it is possible. I was born in a shack down in the hills in Arkansas. We didn't have a pot or the window to throw it out of, and we moved in a covered wagon, walking primarily, to Colorado Springs as an infant. That took 3 years to make that journey. And sometime later on in life, I flew an F-100 from Little Rock Air Force Base up to Stapleton in 45 minutes. And you've got to think that there's been a lot of progress in one lifetime, mine. So where we are going by the end of your lifetime, that's, nobody knows. Has anybody here heard of graphene? Can you give us a little blurb of what it is?
Well, it's my understanding that it's 1 carbon thick, and that you can put it on anything, and it's extremely durable and extremely strong.
That it is. They say that 1 filament the size of a human hair is strong enough to lift an elephant. Automobiles, just think, it's stronger than steel 150 times. Obviously there's some development, but it's primarily made from graphite. And of course, they'll be mining that. But when I was growing up, nobody even knew about a telephone that had wires strung between it. When they put our first mission on the moon, the computer that flew the LIM had 1,700 KB of memory. And I haven't the faintest idea, but I suspect this has a little more. And
that's a little more.
Now, so I want you all to look forward to what is going to be accomplished, and you are going to have a lot to do with it. You are going to be the inspiration of a lot of people. And I know that you may know this, but first time you get a job, and if you're supposed to show up at 8 o'clock in the morning, show up at 7:30. And don't hesitate to put your shoulder to the wheel and work. And I'm sure you know that. But it doesn't come by itself. You will be required to make decisions sometime after you're about 6 years old. Obviously, you've made some good ones already. Speaking of decisions, I'll give you one life experience that might be interesting. As a fighter unit, we were deployed up to Fort Richardson up in Alaska to help train a division of the Army that was training for cold weather operations. And of course, in order to know a little more about what's going on, we thought that it might be wise for the fighter pilots to go out and live with the troops for a day or two. So I volunteered to go first, and they issued me a $600 down sleeping bag. I had mucklucks on, about 4 layers of underwear, and it was quite cold. And we managed to get in a sleeping bag, get warm enough. About 3 in the morning, I got warm enough to go to sleep. Somewhere around 4 o'clock, there was the nature call. Now, if you think that's not a tough decision, you'll want to think about it.
What did you end up doing?
That's right. But at any rate, we won't discuss what happened. But at any rate, those are the kind of things that you're going to be, the decisions you're going to be making. But in going through having to live during World War II and living in an area where I really didn't have any schools, my mother taught me to read and write a little bit. My stepfather, my father could not read or write himself. And so I didn't have the pleasure of going to school all the time. But still, therefore, I was about 3.5 years behind my contemporary schoolmates. And I didn't graduate from high school until I was almost 20. But still, using destiny and making the right decisions, putting forth some effort, I was able to be successful in my point of view. A lot of other people were better than I was, but a lot of people weren't. And now, that's very brief. I flew more kinds of airplanes than you can shake a stick at, and some were pretty yucky and some were pretty super. Yes?
What was your favorite aircraft to fly?
What's that?
What was your favorite aircraft to fly?
Well, I guess I had more fun in a P-51 than about anything. But how I flew it was not, the mission that we were assigned was not too good. We were assigned to do close air support in Korea, and the P-51 was not designed as a close air support airplane. One, it was, as you may not know, it was liquid cooled. It had a radiator like your automobile. And one small 22 bullet in that radiator, and you pump all your ethylene glycol out as coolant, and you had about 3 to 4 minutes that the engine would freeze up, the prop would break the prop shaft, and you were a glider. And so it was not designed for that, but it's still, I got a couple thousand hours in it, and it was still a fun airplane to fly. But I've flown single engine, all kind of trainers, twin engine trainers, flew the B-25, and I've flown the F-100, the F-100, the F-84F, and I flew the KC-97 and the KC-97L with the jet pods on it, and the KC-135, and I guess maybe that it was fun flying every one of them. And anything that you do, make it fun. Enjoy it. It will make life a lot easier for you. And it is pleasure that I can sit here and chat with you. I would like to take the time now to entertain some questions, and we'll go ahead.
How did you become like a fighter pilot, or why?
Well, I guess it was destiny to some degree. After World War II, I worked at the telephone company, Ohio Bell Telephone Company, in Ohio, obviously, and I went back after World War II, but I signed up to be in the reserve, and at that time it was the Army Air Corps, and in 1947 they switched it over to the Air Force, the U.S. Air Force, but I joined the unit at Cleveland Hopkins Airport, which was a reserve unit, and they had trainers and they had P-51s and T-6s, and that's where I got tied up in a P-51, all after the war, yes.
What was it like going through the transition from the Army Air Corps to the United States Air Force?
It was, as far as I was concerned, I was a second lieutenant. And I couldn't tell there was any difference at that point in time.
Yeah.
Now, I graduated from flight school, and may have read the thing, in 1944, February of 44. And being a second lieutenant at the end of the war, promotions were not coming real fast. And I got promoted to first lieutenant in 1951, which was a bit slow.
Wow.
And 6 years to go from first lieutenant to second lieutenant, and it took something like 5 years to go from major to general. And so the time has a lot to do with it.
It's a little different now.
Yeah. But at any rate,
Well, what do you owe your success going from major to a general?
pardon my language, but just getting off your ass and going to work.
I can't tell these kids that in that words, but I tell them in other words.
Well, I'm sure that they probably heard it once before. But nevertheless, what we've been discussing to you is your motivation, your effort, and the good brain that you got, use it. And whatever you're doing, try to be just a shade above the guy next to you. And because you will become supervisors one of these days, and you will recognize the reportee whom you supervise if he's dogging it or if he's working at it. And that really doesn't take a lot of skill. And you can guess whom you are going to try to promote in a class like that. So it tells you, as you have already proven, what you can do to help yourself. Does that answer your question?
Makes sense, sir. Thank you.
Go ahead.
What was your favorite mission, or like what was your favorite station to be at, like when you were in the Army?
Well, I guess I enjoyed the Air War College.
Why don't you explain to them what that is?
Okay, the Air War College the Air University is located down in Maxwell Field Montgomery, Alabama. And I just happened to be down there at a time when the nation was changing a little bit, when the Selma March was taking place. And that changed our country to some degree, and for the better, we hope. But the Air War College was primarily to teach us how to make decisions, give us background and not only in the application of air power, but how to deal with nations. We had Secretary of State, we had numerous folks come and lecture the classes. We had, yes.
How long did you stay there for?
It was a 10-month course, just like a normal college course.
Okay.
And
What do you remember of being in Selma when you had the,
the march,
yes, sir. Tell them what that is and what were your thoughts there?
well, there was, at that time, and I can't remember her name, but the lady that refused to ride in the back of the bus.
Rosa
Parks.
And, yes, and that kind of kicked off the whole thing. And then the march from Selma down to Montgomery, the governor at the time was not too favorable to treating everyone equally. And so that started what we know today as the treating everybody like people, not gauging them by the color of their skin. It's what the individual produces and how he or she may act is important, rather than how big his feet is or the color of his skin.
Were people, first of all, were there any blacks in the Army Air Corps? Did you have any black friends or workers?
I can't recall that we had any of them.
And
No.
no Asians?
No Asian, no.
So then when this happened in Selma, were people shocked or people indifferent or were they concerned or what was the attitude?
Well, a lot of the locals were very upset. And as you may remember, the governor of the state was not too happy about it.
Governor Wallace.
Right. And so these are things that you are going to encounter in your lifestyle. But using the principles that we've talked about, you will be able to overcome. Now, another question back there. Go ahead.
What was one of the greatest challenges you faced while in the military?
Well, I was in the Pentagon, and I was assigned to work on a project, and I was a full colonel. My supervisor was the first lady general in the Air Force. And
What was her name?
I can't remember her name.
First female general in the Air Force.
Right. And she was 1-star, a beautiful person, but still very competent. And I had no intent, but it still took some internal thinking for me to be the right reportee. I told her personally, I said, I know how to treat a general officer, and I know how to treat a pretty lady, but I'm not doggone sure that I know how to treat you.
General Holm,
Right.
is that it?
Yeah.
Here she is right here.
That's she. And, so Right on.
So when there are no females around, you were used to dating any females, but all of a sudden when females became your bosses, then you had to go to professional attitude, which was an adjustment for everybody.
Sure. And I didn't know anything else but to be honest and to tell her the God's truth. And I would have been happy to have her on my arm and go to the dance. But on the other hand, I didn't get the opportunity. But a couple other things that you may have read. I got to attend a 3-day reunion with, I think there were 3 living Medal of Honor winners and World War II aces, including the German ace. Who, you know who that might have been?
The Red Baron. I don't know his name.
I forgot the two. Tell me. It's in here.
Not Richtover, not.
No. It's in the book, and my memory isn't worth a hoot anymore, but he had something like 400 and some kills.
Oh, God.
And it's right in the back, I think, right in the back page. But
Eric Hartman.
Eric Hartman. And I don't care who you are, you look at that guy with some respect. Because even though he was an enemy at the time, he knew which way the guns were pointed. And you gotta hang your hat on people like that. Yes, go ahead.
How do you get your nickname, Mr. Lucky?
I didn't hear you, I'm sorry.
How do you get your nickname, Mr. Lucky?
How did I get my name, Mr. Lucky?
Yeah, your nickname.
Well, because I felt I was lucky to be born in the circumstances I was born and to be able to come and look into your bright faces today. I'm really honored.
Well, we're happy to have you here, Mr. Lucky.
Well, but it works both ways.
And what do you mean by you're lucky under the circumstances you were born? Could you explain that to us a little bit?
Well, I don't know, just the circumstances being, there were no schools. We lived in an area where people just kind of lived off the land. We would grow a little corn in the summertime and do our best. And of course, we would take a rifle and go out and shoot a squirrel. And it was rather primitive way of living. And so under those circumstances, I felt most fortunate, and that's how I tagged myself Mr. Lucky. Go ahead.
What do you think the greatest invention of your lifetime was?
I am not sure, but we lived through the Stone Age, the Iron Age, and the Industrial Revolution, and I kind of like Orville and Wilbur, but on the other hand, I can't say that was the greatest invention. I thought the development of a Temkin roller bearing was quite a feat.
Explain to them what that is.
Yeah. Most axles have some way to hold them, and in railroad cars, they had what they called an old Babbitt bearing with an oil can in the bottom and some kind of cotton lint put in there, and the oil would wick up and lubricate the axle of a railroad axle and, of course, the wheel. And Timken developed a tapered roller bearing, put it in a cage. Have you ever seen
This is what I got right here.
Yeah. And that became a much more efficient, and they almost eliminated what they call hot boxes, because that old bearing would heat up and melt the davit.
Almost frictionless and allow things to go without deterioration.
Right. Go ahead.
What age did you start showing interest in the military?
I'm sorry,
What age did you start showing interest in the military?
What age did you start to want to get into the military?
I was 20. I went down to sign up in World War II. I tried to enlist in the Army Air Corps. And this was 1940. But I had only a high school education, and they wouldn't take me. They said, obviously, you're not qualified. And so I went back and tried to go to college, and that didn't work out because the war came along, and I enlisted in the Army Signal Corps, having worked at the telephone company. I worked in the Signal Corps, enlisted in the Signal Corps in April of '42, and went to Camp Crowder, Missouri, in the Signal Corps, trained, our unit getting ready to go to join some fellow named Patton in Europe, and his army, the Third Army. But that was early 1943, and over Europe, the daylight bombing raids in B-17s and B-24s were wiping out some 800 to 900 crew members each day in the bombing raids over Europe. Well, obviously, that's quite a personnel loss. And so in the Army, the total Army, they put out a notice that anybody would like to transfer to the Air Corps for training to replace those crew members. Of course, I held up my hand and away we went. And that's how I got started flying airplanes. But I always wanted to fly airplanes, yes.
How long did you fly for?
How long did I fly for? Well, I retired in 1978. I flew my own personal airplane till I was 87 years old. And I flew along easy.
That's good.
And I owned about 3 or 4 different airplanes personally. But,
What was your favorite plane you ever flew?
well, I guess the P-51 was. So we talked about that earlier. And, yes.
What was your favorite part about flying?
Say again?
What was your favorite part about flying?
Well, I don't know if I could answer that. Being able to do something that the average Joe couldn't do. That might be a bit egotistical. I don't mean it to be. I mean to be humble for those things. But on the other hand, if you're not a shade better than the guy next to you, you better stay on the ground. Go ahead.
What was it like transitioning from a prop engine to a turbofan jet engine?
Oh,
What was the difference?
well, I could put my feet on the rudder pedals and let them rest most of the time, because in a P-51 you cranked in 7 degrees of right rudder trim on takeoff, and then you stood up on the right rudder with your right foot, and as you put the power in, otherwise it would take off and you'd wipe out a runway light.
Because a single engine plane produces torque,
Yeah.
which is opposite. And if it's one engine, it's torque all the way, so you have to feed in rotor. Same thing with the Cessna. But when you have a twin engine, they cancel it out. When you have a jet, of course, you're going fast.
Yeah.
Okay.
And one little incident, and Akron Canton Airport in Ohio, north central Ohio. I was flying one of our P-51s, and as we were taxiing out, my wingman said, I was a redhead in those days. I see you've got a couple here. They're good ones. And my wingman said, hold it steady on takeoff, Red, on ground control. So we crank up and we get going. I get about 100 foot in the air, and this wingman did a nice slow roll right around I could look up and see his eyes. And that pilot's name was Bob Hoover. And
They don't know Bob Hoover was a very famous test pilot who actually assisted Chuck Yeager.
yeah, I'm sure that you will all get out your iPhones and look up some of these things. This class is over, but how we do it on time?
We have about 10 minutes.
Okay.
Bob Hoover. Tell us about, sir, any second thoughts or regrets that you have from when you were a young person to when you became an older adult, and maybe advice you did not listen to or wish somebody had told you?
Well, that's a lot of them.
Well, we got 9 minutes.
No, I guess that I tried to be as optimistic as I could, and I got hurt when I first went to try to go to college after high school. I won a scholarship, and I had a head injury, and I think I weighed a total of 135 pounds, and they put me in as center. As a freshman, we were kind of cannon fodder for the varsity team, and I thought maybe I should tackle all those guys that were coming up the line on defensive, and of course I ended up with blood running out of my ears and so forth, and I thought, well, that wasn't the best decision I ever made. But at any rate, you'll have a few of those, and they just come naturally, I guess.
If you couldn't fly planes, what would your second option be?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I suppose that I always liked things mechanical, and I suppose I would have been a truck driver. I don't know. But there's sure nothing wrong with being a good truck driver. And but be one better than the guy next to you. And that something in the mechanical area.
Where were you during some of the significant events in America? Where were you when Kennedy got shot? What do you remember about that?
Oh,
Maybe the moon landing or something
Moon
like
landing.
I was in the air the day, the 22nd of November, is that when it
Yep.
was? 63.
Kennedy was shot.
I was in the air in an F-84F coming out of McCord Field in Seattle, landing at, North Dakota. Starts with an R.
Fargo?
Not Fargo, but it starts with an R. What was it?
Not really sure.
I can't remember the name of the base. But at any rate, and please forgive me because it's not as good as it used to be, but I landed there and they told me that. I got back in my F-84F and flew on to Ohio as a very sad individual. I didn't really feel like flying that day. And that was a bad day in our history.
How about during the moon landing?
1969, I can remember that very well. And Neil was an Ohio boy, and I was in Ohio.
Yeah.
And I didn't know him personally, but I got to know John Glenn quite well. He was senator from Ohio when I was in the Pentagon. Now, I couldn't call him up and say, hey, John, let's go have a beer. But I at least could get in and talk to him and go have a beer with him if he had time. And so getting, he puts his pants on one leg at a time like everybody else.
Yeah.
And find people. The moon landing, I was just absolutely flabbergasted.
Did you have any friends that thought it was a Hollywood show?
Well, not at that time, because I was,
Around military people.
yeah, I was with other military people at the time. But later on, sure. Well, even today you hear once in a while some knucklehead, pardon me, but
I had friends in South Carolina who were convinced it was a Hollywood show.
yeah,
It didn't happen.
yeah. But at any rate,
It's that amazing, guys. I mean, it still is.
but that goes right back to what we were talking about earlier. The progress, scientific progress, and hopefully human progress that you people are going to see is absolutely astounding. And you want to look forward to it and be a part of it. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yes. High school. I'm sitting in high school as a 17-year-old kid. Could you imagine a computer? No. Could you imagine, you know what? I even remember this past weekend. It used to be, guys, you picked up the phone and called. Every phone call cost money. And so you'd worry about if it was a long-distance phone call, meaning Chino Valley would be long-distance phone call.
Yeah.
And so my family, get off the phone as long as it's a phone call, or hurry up. I mean, the seconds are dictated. Every second is a penny or whatever. And now it's just, you can pick up and call Europe, you can call Australia, no big deal.
Yeah.
Free on the internet. It's beyond belief. So whatever you guys cannot imagine, which is what I could not imagine in my day,
Sure.
imagine your day, it is going to happen. And that's what is really exciting about the future. Unimaginable. Sir, how old are you?
I'm 93.
93. A round of applause. How many other males, 93, that are able to come talk to a class do you know?
Well, right offhand, I don't know.
Okay, well, my mother's 95, and I do not know any other males. You're looking at this classroom, half of these males will be 95 and be able to talk to classmen when they grow up because of advances in medicine.
Medicine.
When I was a kid, and my grandparents were in their 80s, my grandmother, there were no males. There were 85 or 90 that could come and talk. I'm just saying, your advances, a quarter of you guys will live to be 100 years old. Literally. But you just don't know. I'm saying it's amazing. So it is kind of exciting to think what's happened in his 93 years and what's going to happen in your 95 years.
That
So,
if
amazing.
if there was anything that we left here today, that's the thought that I wanted to bring to you.
All right. Well, everybody, give him a round of applause, please. I actually have a presentation to make for our honored guest here. We have a very rare and esteemed T-shirt from PrescottJROTC.
All right.
And our saying that I invented is "Go do great things." And that's pretty much what you were saying, sir. And we give a round of applause. And there you go. All right.
How about that?
All right. Good job. Thank you very much, sir, for coming. I appreciate it.
You bet.